Can your employer force you to take a vaccine if you have objections to it? I will tell you when the answer to that is yes, when it's no, and when it's maybe on The Durst Show. My grandson, who's a medical student, is about to receive one of the first COVID vaccinations because he is in a hospital and he comes in contact every day with sick people, some of them with COVID, some of them in danger of catching COVID. And I'm waiting to hear from him about any reactions he might have. He's a strong young man in great shape. But nonetheless, I'm worried. Of course I'm worried. It's my grandson. Is the vaccine, has it been sufficiently tested? Has it gone through all the proper protocols? He's going to be a test case in some ways. And there are a lot of Americans who are concerned. There are Americans my age, 82 years old. Has it been tested sufficiently on an over 80 population? I've been isolated for the last 9 months. Has it been sufficiently tested on people who have been isolated and whose immune systems may not have been as active as other people's immune systems when they are exposed to colds and other illnesses on a regular basis? Is it equally effective across racial, gender, and other lines? Normally, it takes a long time for a vaccine to be tested, but we're in a pandemic. We're in an international medical crisis. And so we've broken all records. Operation Warp Speed has produced a variety of potential vaccinations that will prevent the spread of the illness. We still don't know for sure how effective the vaccine is in spreading COVID to other people. We know it's very effective in preventing the person who gets the vaccination from having the full-blown disease. But there are a lot of questions that are not yet answered and will be answered as hundreds of thousands and then millions and then tens of millions and ultimately hundreds of millions of people are vaccinated, and we'll find out how effective this is. But, you know, we always live in a very, very special time. It's called the meantime. The meantime is where we always live, and we're living in the meantime. And in the meantime, there are going to be vaccinations made available systematically to healthcare workers and frontline people first, to the most vulnerable after that, then to people who are not uniquely vulnerable but fit into categories with age, and other and pre-existing conditions, and ultimately we'll get to everybody in the population who wants it. Now, here's the problem. Not everybody is going to want it. There are some polls that indicate as many as 80% of the people offered the vaccine will take it. There are other polls that suggest that at least in some parts of the country and among certain groups, the numbers of people who will willingly take the vaccine is considerably smaller. So here's one of the dilemmas that I really need your input on, because you probably have as much experience and knowledge on this as I do. You have to fill in the wits on the Durst Show. So here's the question. Should employers, private employers, public employers, large employers, small employers, should employers have the power to compel their employees to be vaccinated? The argument in favor is very simple. A lot of people work here. We don't want to expose our workers. We don't want to expose our customers. We want people to be able to come to work, not work at home. And if you get the vaccine, you'll be able to come into work. You'll be safe. We don't have to worry that it will be spread to you. We may still have to have precautions to make sure that you're not a carrier, even though you're immune yourself. There are a lot of questions. But the basic argument is, look, employers have for years required vaccinations of other kind. We require vaccinations for all kinds of things. If you're in the Army, you have to be vaccinated. If you work in a hospital, you have to get the flu vaccine. You have to get the pneumonia vaccine. You have to get a bunch of vaccines. We don't all have free choice when it comes to vaccination. You have free choice. Generally, you can say no, but then you lose your job. So it's freedom constrained by the lack of employment. Let's put aside for a moment whether or not the government can compel everybody to take the vaccine. That's an obviously bigger question. The Supreme Court has weighed in only once in 1905 Jacobson versus Massachusetts, and it said yes in the context of smallpox and a fine. I think it would say yes today, even in the context of real forced vaccination, if the vaccine is effective and if it does prevent the spread of the illness. But putting aside whether the government can compel every citizen above a certain age, obviously, to take the vaccine, also subject to all kinds of medical exemptions if you have unique conditions that would make you susceptible. They won't even give it to you. Even if you want it, they won't give it to you because doctors first do no harm. But the question then turns to employers. Let's start with private employers, big companies, or even small companies. They say, look, we've been tolerating you working at home now for 8 months. We want you in the store. We want you in the shop. We want you in the factory. We want you there and we want you safe. So please, you are required now to come to work, can't work at home anymore, and you are required to be vaccinated. What happens to the people who say no? Well, there are several categories of people who can say no. There are people who have conditions that make it medically unsafe. They may be covered by federal law. There's a federal statute, Americans with Disabilities Act, that says that businesses must make accommodations for people with certain kinds of illnesses. And if those illnesses put you in danger if you take the vaccine, then the statute may require the company to accommodate you by allowing you to work at home, by allowing you to work at off hours, by requiring you to be in an isolated area, but not firing you. So there's that part of the exemption. What about people who are perfectly healthy, a 30-year-old guy, perfectly healthy, and he or she says, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I have a philosophical objection. I have a philosophical objection to being vaccinated, not a medical objection. I just don't think you have the right to tell me what to put in my body. There's no statute protecting that person. But if that person changes his philosophical view and makes it into a religious view, the Torah, the Bible, the New Testament, the Quran, the various other books of religious requirements and observance, the good book tells me I can't do it. First of all, total nonsense. There's no good book that tells you can't do it. If any rabbi, priest, or minister or charlatan tells you that his religion forbids him from taking a vaccine, have him point you to the part of the religion that requires it. All right, it might make an exception for Jehovah's Witnesses. They have an unusual view, but the Jewish religion doesn't permit you to opt out. Nonsense. Christian religion doesn't permit you to opt out. The Muslim religion doesn't permit you to opt out. They all require life-saving procedures. In the Jewish religion, there's a concept called pikuach nefesh, the saving of life. The saving of life, which comes before virtually every other commandment. In the Jewish Bible, there's all kinds of accounts in the book of Leviticus as to what happens if you have various outbreaks of skin disease, whether it was leprosy or something like leprosy. The people had to be isolated. They had to be taken out of the camp. They had to be treated, but they couldn't spread the disease. The words of Jesus don't encourage people to become typhoid Marys and spread the illness. You'll hear charlatans proclaim in the name of religion that they can't take a vaccine. They are wrong religiously. They are wrong constitutionally. They are wrong morally. But conceivably, they could win a case if they brought a challenge. This Supreme Court is now very sympathetic to religion, more sympathetic to religion than to secular philosophical objections. So you might see an exception carved out for religion. Will it be abused? Of course it will be abused. Very different to have a medical exemption. It's hard to fake a medical condition. It's very easy to fake a religious objection. And so we're going to see a conflict between those who proclaim a religious objection and those who say, wait a minute, you can have your religion, but you can't endanger us with your religion. And now I want to talk about a very delicate issue that's hard to talk about. It turns out, according to some recent polls, that a disproportionate number of African Americans may refuse to take the vaccine. It's completely understandable historically. We know that African Americans were experimented on horribly in Tuskegee and elsewhere. There's a long history which clearly warrants suspicion by members of the African American community. I think in the end, we should realize this is a different America than the America that allowed the Tuskegee experiments and others to go forward. Very, very different America. We now have a real enforcement of the equal protection law in many contexts, not in every context. But let's hypothesize the fact that you're going to get many more African Americans than non-African Americans who will refuse to be vaccinated. And as a result of that, if you compel employers or permit employers to compel vaccination as a condition of employment, you're going to find a disproportionate number of African Americans being fired. Are they being fired on racial grounds? Well, the courts have said if you can show a disparate impact, if you can show that even if it wasn't intended to discriminate based on race, that it has a major, not knowing, disproportionate impact on a particular racial group, there might be a problem. So we should anticipate that problem as well. There's no more volatile recipe for disaster than when you combine race, religion, medicine, politics. All of them are going to be involved in decisions regarding whether or not you can compel the vaccine. So let's be ready for it. We have to be prepared. We know that employers are allowed to create incentives to taking the vaccine, and surely they should do that. People who get the vaccine get to come to work first, maybe get bonuses, maybe get rewards for taking the vaccine because they're helping to promote a safer work environment, get promoted. All kinds of incentives can be given. Of course, every time there's an incentive to some, the effect is a disincentive to others, that others are punished for not complying with what the company wants you to do. And you might imagine some lawsuits. We have to ask what the unions will do, what their position will be, because unionization is still very important in certain aspects of our economy, manufacturing particularly. And so we're going to see the unions get involved. We're going to see other groups, civil liberties groups get involved, religious groups get involved. This is not going to be an easy passage. The goal is that the vast majority of Americans will voluntarily line up to take the vaccine, that there will be fights about who gets it first. Everybody's going to want it. And we have to have a fair method for allocating vaccines and other medical procedures that are life-saving. But we also have to deal with the dissenters. And I'm not talking about only anti-vaxxers who wouldn't take any vaccine. I'm talking about people who do take the flu vaccine, do take the pneumonia vaccine, do take the shingles vaccine, do take the polio vaccine if it's still given, do take smallpox if that's still necessary. I don't know how many vaccinations I've had in my life. I remember just being so pleased when the Salk and Sabin vaccines came out during the polio epidemics of my youth, because I lost a friend to the polio epidemic of the 1950s. We couldn't swim in the summers. It was, a horrible experience. Philip Roth has written a great novel about his generation and my generation experiencing polio during the summers. But this vaccine is different because of the speed with which it is being brought to, I hate to say market, because I'm not talking about the economic aspects of it. I don't know who's going to make money, who's not going to make money. I think a lot of this is going to be done without profit to the large pharmaceutical companies. They've done an amazing job. Whatever you might argue about big pharma, everybody has their complaints. Everybody has their gripes. They charge too much for insulin. They charge too much for this. They charge too much for that. All true. Of course, R&D, research and development, are very, very expensive. But you gotta give them kudos for how quickly a number of these pharmaceutical companies, I don't want to name them because they're still in development and who knows how effective each will be, but you just in general have to praise Operation Warp Speed and the quickness with which this vaccine, which we hope will work, has come to market. It was the last day of February. I happened to be in Israel making a speech and having dinner with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. I think it was the last day of February, just before the elections. And he told me about this pandemic that was about to occur and how it would close down Israel and other countries, and how, in fact, my daughter and her fiance was supposed to meet us in Israel. They were shut down. They couldn't come to Israel. They were stuck in Turkey. So that was only the end of January, beginning of February, the end of February, beginning of March, we're talking about now. And it's been only really 9-10 months, and we may see the vaccine being delivered to my grandson, to other doctors, to other frontline people. We hope it will go smoothly, but we know that we have to anticipate all the legal, moral, ethical, political problems that will arise. And this is going to be a central place, the Der Show, to discuss those problems, because when I taught at Harvard for 50 years, I was known as the professor, the and professor, rather. The and professor. Why was I called the and professor? Because every course I taught was something and law. Medicine and law, psychiatry and law, science and law, philosophy and law, literature and law, Shakespeare and the law. I even taught a course on baseball and the law. So I've always been interested in interdisciplinary issues, and I taught courses on ethics, where I combined legal ethics, medical ethics, journalistic ethics, oxymoron in my view. But in any event, these problems raise incredibly difficult questions of all of these ethical and legal concerns. And so you'll hear a lot more about them as the pandemic continues and hopefully ends with the rollout of the vaccine. So I want your views on how employers should handle this situation. Please call in to the Der Show. I know you'll give me intelligent views. I know you'll give me insights from your own backgrounds, your own experience, your own views. I challenge anybody to state a religious objection to it. I don't think there is one, but if you think there is one, you please accept my challenge. Obviously, medical exceptions and other philosophical objections, I understand. I don't agree with them, but I understand them. But religious objections, you're really going to have to persuade me. So call the Der Show, and let's hear who our callers today are. Our first call today is from Kobe in New York.
Hi, this is Kobe from New York. I listened to your argument on Friday for ending the death sentence, and I was curious what you thought of Israel giving the death penalty to Adolf Eichmann. Thanks.
It's a great question. I was a young law student when the death penalty was given to Adolf Eichmann, and I wrote a letter to the Washington Post opposing the death penalty, both on moral grounds and practical grounds. The moral grounds were I'm always opposed to the death penalty. I don't think that human beings should take life, particularly in revenge, no matter how horrendous, and nothing could be more horrendous than what Eichmann did, coming down to Hungary and Budapest and systematically murdering the Jewish population in those cities and that country. It was just beyond comprehension. But I was still opposed to the death penalty. And I said to Israel in my letter, imagine what a light you will be unto the world if you don't execute Eichmann for the worst possible crime committed against humanity. No one else will be able to execute anybody. I said also, if you keep him alive, he will lead you to other Nazi war criminals living in Brazil. He would lead you to the trail of those who helped rescue Nazi war criminals. Some of them were very prominent people, including Gertrude Stein, who is an icon to a lot of feminists. Gertrude Stein was a Nazi sympathizer. Though she was Jewish, she proposed Adolf Hitler for the Nobel Peace Prize, and she helped the head of the Gestapo in southern France escape from justice. So if Eichmann had not been executed, he might very well, in exchange for considerations, have revealed the location of many of his Nazi colleagues. But no, I was opposed to the death penalty for Eichmann. I was opposed to the death penalty for John Demjanjuk, Ivan the Terrible. And it turned out that Ivan the Terrible may not have been as guilty. He may have been Ivan the Very Bad, but not Ivan the Terrible, We make mistakes when we execute people. Obviously, it wouldn't have been a mistake to execute Eichmann, and they did execute him. And I don't think anybody shed a tear over that, but I did write to the Israeli government through my letter to the editor, urging them not to impose the death penalty. So I've been completely consistent in my opposition to the death penalty for anybody. Our next call is from Alexis in Florida.
My question for Alan is, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for your show. I really enjoy it. My question is the reasons for why you're declining to state who you voted for in the election. At first, I thought it was privacy, but I know you're very open about who you voted for in 2016. So I'd like to hear your answer. Thank you.
It's a good question. I not only was open in 2016, I campaigned for Hillary Clinton. I contributed openly. I'm in the federal books about my contributions are there. And Hillary Clinton was my friend, and I openly supported her. This election is so divisive. Of course, I had a role. I played a legal role in the representation of President Trump against impeachment. Therefore, technically, I had a legal relationship with him. I just thought, in light of everything, it was best, in this case, to keep my vote to myself. People have been, speculating and guessing, and, keep speculating and guessing. I voted my conscience. I'm proud of my vote, and I'll never tell anybody who I voted for or against. Our next call is from Mike in New Orleans.
This is Mike from New Orleans. In regards to what should YouTube and Facebook and any of the other platforms publish? Everything. They should publish everything, 100%. Regardless if it incites violence, regardless if it does anything, if it's completely false. There's videos on YouTube trying to prove why the earth is flat. You know it's not flat, but they're still up there. Here's how this should be taken care of. There is an entire team of litigators in the United States that are more than happy to take businesses to court if they violate some odd statute protecting a beetle somewhere in the United States that's supposed to be protected. And even though the statute is completely irrelevant to where something was being built, they didn't do the study to protect it. There's a ton of these things going on in California, for example. Let the litigators figure it out. If someone posts a video that is inciting violence against a group, give it to the litigators. They'll take them to court, find that it's a violation. Let the court decide that that video needs to come down. Now you have a third party adjudicating the matter instead of the business who monetizes it adjudicating the matter. I think that kind of gives everyone a little bit breathing room when we allow the law to just take over the process. Thanks again. Bye.
I appreciate that. That's an interesting point of view. In other words, you're suggesting that the suit be brought against the person who was in the video, and that's available under the law today. Section 230 only immunizes the platform itself, so that if YouTube runs me making a defamatory statement against you, you can sue me, you just can't sue YouTube. But what about the difficult cases that we've talked about? Child pornography. If you allow your platform to be used to show child pornography, in general, you're guilty of a serious crime. You might even be guilty of helping to promote child pornography because people will create child pornography, will abuse children, will violate the law in order to get videos that are put on your show. So I don't think that Google or YouTube or anybody else should be required to show child pornography. Another example, not like child pornography, but raises questions, is Holocaust denial. Legal in the United States. In the United States, you can go on YouTube and you can go on a street corner and say the Holocaust never occurred. You're an idiot and a liar and a bigot and everything else if you do say that, because everybody knows the Holocaust occurred. There's absolutely no room for dispute there. I've been to the gas chambers. I've seen them. I've seen the crematoria. I've seen, the evidence. I've seen the confessions of the people, the eyewitnesses. Of course, the Holocaust occurred. The problem is that in Germany and Canada and other countries in the world that also have access to YouTube and Facebook and everybody else, it is a crime to say the Holocaust didn't occur. Now, to show you how complicated it is, in Turkey it's a crime to say that the Armenian genocide did occur And in France, it's a crime to say that it didn't occur. So I'm not in favor of criminalizing opinions, even those that are extremely false, like Holocaust denial or denial of the Turkish genocide. But when it comes to child pornography or snuff films or things of those kind, which might actually incentivize people to abuse or kill other people, I think the issue is a rather different one. But, we're not there. We're talking about YouTube taking down videos that just simply express an opinion as to whether the election was stolen or not. Even if you have the strongest views that the election wasn't stolen and was the fairest election in history, surely there's no reason not to allow the opposite view to be expressed, and you just destroy it and defeat it and debate it in the courtroom of public opinion. And, that's where you'll win the debate. So I don't think that any of the social networks should take down any of these things that are matters of opinion, even if the opinions are based on erroneous facts. So that's my view. I understand your view, and I'm interested in everybody's view on this very complicated issue. These are the hardest First Amendment issues that we will face in the 21st century, certainly the beginning of the 21st century. Who knows what technology will develop in the next 40 or 50 years, but that's young folks, that's your problem, not my problem. I won't be here to comment on it. You can always play back what I've said now. Maybe it'll be relevant 50 years from now. Hopefully it will be. But you'll have to deal with your own problems 50 years from now. So thanks for your call. Our next call is from Thomas in Tennessee.
Hello, Professor. This is Thomas in Memphis, Tennessee. I was listening to your podcast today about the young man who was executed. And I'm a conservative, libertarian in some regard, and I actually changed my views about the death penalty a few years ago because I was talking to someone once about how we on the right, we want government to be very limited in its power. We want to keep it small. We believe the individual and perhaps the lowest level of government, being the local government, should have the most power, and the federal and state government should have the least amount of power. And while having that conversation, it just occurred to me that why, as a small government person, would I want my government to have the power to kill me? That really is contrary to what we claim to believe on the right. And I changed my view. I decided that at that point I was against the death penalty. I do not want the same government that I do not trust to, give me socialized medicine or my education system and all these other things that I think that should be left to the lowest level of government and or the people. I don't want any level of government to be able to kill the population. The death toll, or the death count, of the rest of the world when it comes to government, they have the highest body count by far. So I think that governments should not be allowed to kill their own people. And I really think that the Republican Party and the conservative movement really needs to take a hard look at their own beliefs if they want to ever make a change in this arena. Just interested in your comment on that. Thanks so much. Love the show. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. You are really, really a rare American. You actually changed your mind. I wish there were more people out there with sufficiently open minds to change them. I'm sure many of my viewers and listeners do have open minds and do occasionally change their minds. But we have discovered, generally over time, that people maintain views that they've had for a long time, particularly on hot-button topics like the death penalty. We see over the years that the numbers of people supporting it and opposing it do change, but not dramatically. They really range between 40 and 60%, sometimes 40% one way, sometimes 40% the other way. We did see that in England, which favored the death penalty for many years, one tragic case of an execution of an innocent person changed the mind of the country. And they abolished the death penalty and kept it abolished. And other countries as well, sometimes a dramatic case will change the views. The Eichmann case in Israel changed the views of many Israelis who were against the death penalty but favored it for Adolf Eichmann. But congratulations for having an open mind. I think your argument's an interesting one, and I would hope that more conservatives would understand what enormous power you give to the government when you give them power to take a human life on conditions of uncertainty. You know, we always hear, well, we only execute people when it's absolutely clear that they're the worst of the worst. In the Brandon Menard case, that wasn't the case. He's dead now, 3-4 days. We still don't know whether or not he committed murder or he was merely an accessory after the crime. We still don't know whether or not he was sentenced to death because they thought he was dangerous and that he would endanger other prisoners, which has proved to be untrue after 22 years of him being a model prisoner. So we don't only execute for certainty. There's a woman now on death row who is being executed because she killed a pregnant woman, tore open her stomach, and ripped out the baby that she wanted it. If that's not a sign of insanity at its most extreme, I don't know what is. And insanity has always been a defense from the time of the Bible and the time of the Romans and the time of the Constitution. So we don't impose the death penalty fairly in this country. We impose it largely based on race and ethnicity and gender and wealth and your ability to hire a lawyer. So thank you for joining me and others in opposing the death penalty. And I hope you're right. I hope more conservatives will see that giving the government the power to kill is inconsistent with conservative and libertarian principles. Our last call for today is from Sean in Kansas.
Hi, Alan. My name is Sean Foster, and I'm from Kansas. I'm a conservative. Called before. I heard what you said yesterday. I take your point very well, that we do not have a right to vote for a president, but that's not what I was talking about. What I was talking about is that we no longer have sovereignty if we don't get to decide who our leaders are. The people are sovereign. They get to decide who the government is. But if there's cheating, the leaders have divorced themselves from the people. They don't need the people to gain power any longer. They don't need the people at all for anything. All they got to do is short circuit. Now, the Republicans have two choices. One, to submit and let the Democrats rule them from now on, or to cheat also. Frankly, I think probably the first option is best. It's best to be holy. It is best to be innocent. Maybe things will turn around. I really doubt it, though, because I can't imagine the Democrats deciding not to cheat anymore. So now we have a ruling class that does not need the people to gain power. And you know where that leads. Thank you very much. Bye.
I think there's a third alternative to the two that you suggested, and it's the alternative that I've been pushing on the Durr Show, the creation for the future of a VIP, of a voter integrity panel consisting of extraordinarily reputable former justices of the Supreme Court, former judges, former presidents and deans of universities, rabbi ministers and priests who are above reproach, former CEOs of major companies, nonpartisan, and they could do a great deal to prevent either party from cheating. Look, there's always cheating in elections. I have no doubt there's always cheating in elections. People move out of state, and now with write-in ballots, they can say they lived in the state, and they can vote in a state that's more of a purple state than either a red state or a blue state. It happens. It happens on both sides. We can, I think, reduce the amount of cheating and be sovereign, because I agree with you that, you know, if elections are rigged as they were in Venezuela and have always been in Belarus and in Iran and China and in the former Soviet Union and perhaps today in Russia, if elections are rigged, that you people don't have sovereignty. So I want fair elections. I want major increases in enfranchisement. I learned today that approximately 70 million eligible voters did not vote in this election. How could anybody not vote in this election? You have to have strong views about Donald Trump, whether love him or hate him. You have to have strong views about him. And I think you probably have to have strong views about Joe Biden. How can you stay home and not vote? But 70 million Americans apparently didn't vote, even though we had the largest turnout in the history of elections. That's almost a third, a little under a third of the population did not exercise their right to enfranchisement. And, I hope that if we have a commission, it will encourage people to vote and they'll know that their votes count. But these are issues that must be debated. They must be debated on the Der Show, and they should be debated on YouTube and all the other social media. And do not allow the social media to impose restraints on you, because that too is a denial of sovereignty, especially if they do it because they're protected by the law under Section 230. So I renew my challenge. I know some of you have now written to YouTube setting out the challenge. Take down my show. That one episode of my show, the one with Joel Pollack, in which he raises doubts about the election itself. I know some of my viewers share those doubts. I know some of my viewers don't share those doubts. Whatever you might think of the election, the right of every American to criticize an election is protected under the First Amendment and under the First Amendment and freedom of speech culture that we should all be supporting. So, again, if YouTube does take down the show, we will sue them and we will try to take away their immunity under Section 230. So we know that YouTube censors, but on this show, any thoughtful view will get an airing, and I will answer every question that you have when you call and listen and watch The Der Show. And please call me with questions and comments and criticisms that you have of me and the show. The number is 216-710-0050. 216-710-0050. Call me. I really want to hear what you have to say. You provide the wits that completes the Der Show wits.